right. Welcome, everyone. Another episode ShiftED podcast coming to you. I am reaching across the pond. I am pulling in the AI educator, Dan Fitzpatrick. We have so much to talk about AI. It's such a hot topic in schools now. And Dan is going to help us shed some light. Now, Dan's an author, ex-high school teacher, writes podcasts every day, speaks, and I think that he's dominated his focus on AI these days. Dan, thanks so much for joining me today, and yeah, we'll AI it.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I appreciate you having me and for making this work with the time difference and everything. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining. It's always a pleasure to talk to insightful people, or you've spent probably more time than most of us focusing of looking and researching and playing around with AI. So, but Dan, before we get there, what were some of your moments that led you here? Like, how did you become the AI educator?
Yeah, I guess I remember when I was training to be a high school teacher. I remember I went into once. We had like it was called a skit program. I'm not sure if you have them in Canada, but they kind of train on the job. So you start with a 60% timetable. So um,
Okay.
I was I was teaching kind of from day one, and then every Friday at the school I was at, we would have teacher training kind of classes and sessions. So I remember this one Friday, it was led by one of the tech teachers, and they were talking about Google for education, essentially. Like, I mean,
Mm,
kind of the early versions of it and
right.
cloud computing, and it
Mm,
just captured my imagination from that moment because I remember thinking, why aren't we just using cloud computing everywhere? Like, we can
right.
put student resources on there. Students can access them from any device, from home at any time. Surely this just makes sense. And I suppose, yeah, so got very excited about the prospect of technology enhancing learning and the school experience for students. So kind of was always an advocate in my teaching career, and I moved into leadership where I was responsible for technology integration. Then I moved into college education where I kind of moved into a more strategic director role around integrating technology into college education. And it was there when I kind of started playing around with early LLMs, the technology behind it, like a tool like ChatGPT,
Mhm.
and kind of seeing again very rudimentary versions of it, but starting to see this could have benefits for our teachers, especially teachers who have to give feedback on large amounts of
Right.
writing. That was kind of my first kind of way in to think, right, well, how could this help? And then, of course, history. It's in the history books now. End of November 2022, ChatGPT was released.
Right.
Kind of
Right.
changed the course of the world, I suppose, over the last 2 years, and the world is still kind of reeling from it and not trying to understand it. And every business is trying to understand it. Every school is trying to some degree understand it. So
Mhm.
having a bit of knowledge about it, having knowledge about technology integration in school, I decided to start writing about it. Really, firstly on social media, then in my books, and it kind of allowed me to step aside from the day job and focus on this full time. And
Well,
yeah, I suppose I get to travel the world and help schools,
amazing.
districts, businesses integrate AI.
That's amazing. Amazing. And for you, like, what was your first reaction to when chat, opened its doors in that, cold November day? Like, what were
Yeah.
your first impressions when you were just starting to muck around with it a bit? Like, what was your kind of reaction to it all?
I suppose I think when it comes to this type of thing, I'm naturally an optimist,
Mm,
and so I could when I saw how good that that first or that early version of ChatGPT was, I kind of thought, well, let's ask it to do some things.
mm,
It's very very cliche now, but like back at the end of November 2022, asking ChatGPT to write a lesson plan for you was almost monumental. It was huge, and
mhm,
just seeing that kind of response from it, and seeing how, and I suppose my mind went straight to. I remember when I was teaching full time, and and a lot of my colleagues had this attitude as well, especially those with ambition. It was kind of like every weekend you would say, right, one day of that weekend's a work day. You weren't getting paid for it, but
Mm,
you just knew that if you wanted to stay ahead and at the top of your game, you're going to have to dedicate at least one day of that weekend
right.
to, yeah, to for the workload.
Yeah.
And and I did that, and I threw myself into that, especially earlier on in my career, and I kind of my mind straight away thought, oh my goodness, all that time I spent upstairs in the box room in our house, like, not seeing family, not seeing friends, on an evening, like with my laptop in front of the TV, doing work and getting feedback, and I just kind of thought I need to. At that moment, nobody else was really talking about it. I felt, especially not in the social circles I was in, and
Yeah.
so I just thought I need to put things out there. So yeah, it kind of excited me.
Yeah.
It made me really positive about first and foremost that workload element.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, I heard this ratio 80/20. Um
Okay, yeah.
and they were saying that AI is great at like 80% of your like school tasks, but your professional judgment still is that 20%, right? So you always are kind of like having it generate things, but at the same time, your professionalism is still a part of that
Yeah.
mix.
I don't know. I'd probably flip that on its head. I'd probably say
Hmm.
probably you, your skills and knowledge and experience is probably the 80%.
Right.
Now, don't get me wrong. I think ChatGPT can help massively. I suppose probably like admin tasks. It can
Right.
do a lot.
Right. Yeah, more like administrative, like school is so
Yeah.
full of those tasks too, right? Like all of these like administrative, like monotonous work. It's
Mm.
and there's a lot less of like working with the kids and like interacting in those developmental relationships. Do you
Yeah.
think that chat has an ability or AI, I'll say AI, we'll keep it general, that it has the ability to help teachers have more focus on humans rather than computers, even though we're talking about machine learning?
I think it has that potential, and I use that word potential
Right.
because I see some educators who are doing it,
Mm-hmm.
a lot who aren't. I think I suppose it's kind of like it's becoming a bit of a cliche in itself now, but I always kind of compare this to kind of the mid 90s of the internet, and
Right. Totally.
there
Yeah.
was a lot of hype, and a lot of it rightfully so, to be honest,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
people saying, "Oh, look what you can do! Look at this email thing! Look at this browser! I can search a website." And it was very unregulated. But most people didn't kind of get it. I remember my
Hmm.
parents, and I think it was 97. I was 11, and we got a computer in our dining. I remember it was in the dining room on like a trolley. And after a few weeks, my parents, I think, sent it back because I never saw it again.
Okay.
And I think they just collectively came to the decision, what's the fuss? Like, why do we need this? And they probably, I didn't come from a well-off family, so we probably had it on
Mm,
finance. So I think they probably just thought, yeah, let's send it back and save
right.
ourselves some money. And I think unless you were really dedicated to it in those early days, it was a just kind of bit like, well,
Right.
what value is it going to bring?
Sure.
But I
Sure.
think there's a lot of people kind of like that with AI at the moment. So I think
Mm,
kind of those early adopters, the ones who are really getting into it, trying to figure out their own workflow with it, and
right.
it's a bit you've got to stumble across it. You've got to
Mm,
find that works well. If I do something with that tool, and then I bring this tool in, it'll create a presentation deck for me. This is a and then
mm,
but you've almost got to kind of discover that for yourself.
yeah.
There's very few just kind of one click tools. So it requires a bit of upfront time and dedication, and which obviously not all teachers, probably very few, are going to actually do that. So I
Mm,
can see it offering a lot of value, and I've heard research stats like 3 hours a week, say time saved, and so on.
sure.
Um, but I think I think we've still got a long journey to go with this
Sure.
technology, and to see
Absolutely.
its actual potential to successfully affect education. I don't think it's going away.
Right.
So I think it's going to be here. I don't think we're going to
Totally.
get to the point where we're like, right, we played around with the AI, but let's
Yeah,
leave
we're
it.
done with that now. Put it
Yeah.
away, shelve it. Right.
I think it has to be, even if some schools do decide to restrict it, and in England we do get a lot of traditional schools who are banning mobile
Yep.
phones and so on.
Mhm.
It's going to be part of the workflow of a lot of people. Just like I forget who said it now. Might have been Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google's, like said it's more like electricity
Mm,
than a new technology, and
right.
that it's just going to be part of everything. So I
Totally.
think I think the potential's there, but we've got a long way to go to realize that potential, I think.
Totally. Yeah, and I mean, I'm doing a lot of presentations too about AI with educators and consultants, teachers. Um, and there's always these misconceptions I find. And like you're so right on. Like you'll always have your early adapters that are going to be all over it, but that's a small minority I find of the overall kind of. And oftentimes I get a lot of misconceptions about what it is and what it can do, and it's more of a fear than an embracing of, right? But again, your analogy between the internet, like it really reinforces that. I mean, can you imagine life without the internet right now? I mean, none of this, we'd be doing none of this, right?
Yeah,
I'd
yeah,
never be able to talk with you.
yeah,
We just, so we're so used to this now because it's been around for so long. Do you think that the misconceptions that teachers have will fade away eventually and blossom in, or do you think that it's something that will never be fully integrated within the educational system?
I've got a feeling it'll linger for quite a while. I think
Right.
hopefully as the technology develops and technology companies come up with more solutions, especially around ethics and privacy and all of that kind of thing, it'll quell a lot of fears, hopefully.
Mm,
Um, and again, like I remember I used to give a presentation years ago where the first I wish I could find the slide deck because I'd love to use it again, but the first few slides were quotes about technology, and it was
right.
like the first quote was like something like this new technology is invading our homes and taking our children's attention. And the whole idea is you say to the audience, what is this talking about? And they normally say something like, it's the internet or it's a cell phone. And and then you reveal that actually they're talking about the telephone, and it's like a quote from 80 years ago or something. So you find
Mm,
these features
totally. Yeah.
about technology throughout the ages, and
Mm,
then it becomes kind of part of life. But I do think, I mean, look, today it's 30 years, I suppose, since the internet started to become very mainstream, and we still have a lot of caution around it in education.
true.
Not everywhere. Some schools are one-to-one device. They are doing it in a
Right.
healthy way, in an impactful way. But again, I come back to the English system where I'm based, and there's still many schools who the only technology in a classroom is the 10-year-old PC at the front of the room, which the teacher does their register on and pulls up their PowerPoint. So
Yeah.
and that's 30 years later. So I still think we're still going to be talking about the ethics of this. There's still going to be research being done in 20 years' time, and that makes us think twice, a bit like around
Mm,
social media now and so on.
sure.
Um,
Yeah.
but I suppose coming back to what we said before, it isn't going to go away. So we have to find a way to make sure that our students are living in this world in a safe way and in a way where they have the skills for it to benefit them and not harm them, I guess.
Right. Right. And in your latest book, Infinite Education, you present this four-step blueprint for educational transformation.
Mm.
Could you give us a little insight or a little preview into what you explore within those four steps?
Yeah, absolutely. So the four steps are scope. So it's a very practical. It could be applied to so many different things, but it's about how do you make change happen within an organization essentially. And I've kind of
Mm,
plugged AI into that.
okay.
And it's a lot
Okay.
of things I learned when I was a director within college education, and
Hmm.
a lot of things I was taught from my colleagues on how to kind of make change happen within at an executive level. It was quite a big college group that had an executive team and so on. So I kind of adapted a lot of that. So yeah, it was so scope, kind of being able to survey what's going on within your school, what teachers are using, so on, what's going on outside the school, what the trends are. Then it's shape. So how do you start to shape the message, the strategy, the plan of where you want to go with this?
Mm.
Then the next one, and I think a lot of organizations kind of stop there. They
Right.
look around, they go, right, can you write a strategy on this? Somebody writes the strategy, they save it as a PDF, and it goes on the website and gets sent to parents and governors. But I
Check
think,
the box.
yeah, yeah,
Right, right.
and it's referred to every now and then. But I think that's kind of step one, really.
Mm,
Well, step one and two within this framework, but it's
mhm,
kind of the
mhm,
first. It's almost the least important bit in a way because for me, the second two bits, which are influence and alignment, I think are so important. And that kind of, it's a strategy skill that goes way beyond just being able to write a strategy.
mm.
I suppose it's a bit like, and I've just come up with this analogy off the top of my head. I've never used it before, but it's come into my mind. It's a bit like being able to draw a car and being able to drive a car.
Mm.
Like I suppose every
Yes.
you could ask a 4-year-old to draw a car. Asking to
Sure.
drive a car is something very, very different. So,
Right, right,
and
right.
I think the driving the car bit is the how do you realize that strategy? How do you manifest it?
Mm,
And that essentially comes down to what we've kind of traditionally called change management,
right.
being able to influence the people in our organization and then being able to align them. And I
Mm,
think that's kind of where elite leadership comes in.
right,
Um,
right.
but I do think that those are skills that anybody can learn, and it's just practicing those skills. So the kind of the second half of the book is goes through each of those 4 steps, and it I kind of preface it by saying, right, you've got to get a group together. I call it an accelerator group, whether that
Mm,
be a group in your school or a regional group, or kind of a multifaceted community group. So you could have
mm,
parents, teachers, students, local
right.
government, whatever it is.
Mm,
And then I've got a lot of tasks in there. It's a bit like a playbook, really, the second half of the book where
mm,
I go, right, what about this task in terms of influence, and I bring in psychology
mm.
and so on to try and just give people a bit of a toolkit to
Yeah, totally.
on that road with and who maybe have never done it before.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's um, important information for school leaders to have access to and to understand, and because the acceleration of AI is not slowing down at all. We are seeing almost daily. I mean, I love your daily podcast where you kind of isolate on one little topic, but
Yeah,
I mean, you
thanks.
have enough to talk about something every single day, which is amazing. I love
Yeah.
the little clippets. I encourage listeners to go and listen to the
Oh,
AI
thank you.
Educator podcast. Um, so with education, we have AI too, and I know that you've been asked this question before about the age factor, about using AI, and we're kind of battling with that here in Quebec, Canada, where the platforms are putting age restrictions on.
Mm.
Yet we want to make sure our kids understand this. How do you recommend that teachers in schools, elementary through high school? I mean, I guess some platforms are 13 now, 14, 16. They're around those age range, but we need to start early, right? Like I always felt that we missed the train on social media, of training of not training the kids, but creating an awareness of,
Yeah, yeah,
digital citizenship and all of that stuff. Kind of like everyone was responsible for it, but nobody really touched on it because what does that have to do with English or math or science?
yeah.
Like our subjects. How do you find that we're going to integrate AI with these age restrictions that are in place?
Yeah, I think probably first of all, I think it's good to look at it in kind of two categories. So there's teaching about AI, and then there's teaching kind of with AI. And I suppose we probably need to do both. And I suppose the first part of that, the teaching about AI, doesn't you don't necessarily have to give your elementary children the tools.
Mm,
You can demonstrate things for them. You can do kind of indirect activities that get across the point of how these things
right.
work. There are some tools out there. They're quite older tools now, but things like Google have got a tool called Teachable Machine and
Right.
what's it called? Sketch Draw, something like that.
Yeah, sketch it.
Yeah, where you
We played with that with
draw.
some kids.
Yeah,
Because
and
I
it kind
find that
of
that's a great platform too, because it shows you how it learn, how it decides
yeah,
what it might be, what you're drawing with the
yeah, and
model. Like there's
and it's
tons of
quite
data, and
funny.
you're like, ah, cool.
Yeah, and it's engaging the way it
Yeah.
talks, like a very kind of early voice on their AI voice, which is quite kind
Totally.
of funny. And
Yeah,
yeah,
they're
it's
hilarious. It's a cat, it's a dog, it's a horse,
yeah,
it's a
yeah. So I think things like that really help.
yeah,
Um, I think then the second part of that, how do you use the AI? Yeah, I suppose it's going to depend on the region, like what your school policy is, what the policy is from local government and so on. But that we're starting to see. I had the privilege of being at Google HQ in San Francisco last week,
hmm,
and I was talking with the education team, and I didn't realize this, but they they've rolled out Gemini for all ages now. So if
okay,
you are within Google Workspace and you think you might have to pay a higher tier for Gemini, but
hmm,
you your your students can use it. Not the full array of tools,
right,
and
right,
and maybe not the Gemini tool within certain apps, but the raw form of Gemini, students can use it. So I think
hmm,
we are starting to see now that those some companies, especially the more established companies, the more
right,
giving us a bit of confidence that they can be used, and also
right,
some third party apps, School AI, Magic School, Brisk, kind of
right,
all offering chatbots that the teacher can train and share the link with students.
hmm,
Um, some of it's still a grey area. I think
yeah, yeah,
that's why you've got to kind of check just with your school. Some IT
for
managers are
sure,
happy, some aren't, to kind of because it goes in that grey area. But I
yeah,
think there are ways, and I think we're starting to see a lot of AI literacy curriculums be
hmm,
be created. There was one, in fact, my podcast this morning was all about it, and I can't remember the name of it now. But yeah, check out the podcast. But it's a great kind of overview, a framework of what the different parts of AI literacy should be,
right.
and how.
It's called From AI Literacy to AI Fluency, the framework.
Yes, that's the one. Yeah. And it's good. It's kind of it's a framework for you to then build kind of a curriculum on top of,
Okay,
like a set of standards, I guess. But
right, right,
yeah, I really like it. I think it's good. They've really thought through the different elements. So I think we can do this, and I think we can, and not treating AI as like a subject, like, oh, we'll just leave it to computer science.
right,
I
right,
think I think AI is a context. It's not a subject. So
mm, mm,
we need to bring it into different. I suppose, like we would, um, you might bring careers into your lesson. So you might be teaching a class on biology and plant cells, but I think good teachers contextualize it. They talk about the careers that are
sure,
where this might be useful in the real world. And I
right,
think just doing more of that, but now the real world is going to involve AI. Every job, pretty much every sector is going to be using AI. So perfect
absolutely,
opportunity to bring. Like I was doing a workshop the other day, actually using Google's Teachable Machine, where you literally just show it a few images, and
hmm,
I think I did a fox. So I did like three images of a fox, three images of a badger. It learned what each one was, and then I showed it a picture of a badger, and then because it's trained itself, it says, right, that's definitely a badger, or that's definitely a
right,
fox. You could use
right,
that with plant cells, like different types of
yeah,
cells. You train it on,
totally,
and it could be a way to bring that into the biology class or whatever
yeah.
class we're doing.
I mean,
Yeah.
forget simulations. I mean, go deeper, go higher. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I love that idea. And then, just curiously, like, what have been the most effective integration of AI have that you've seen? Maybe a couple of examples you could share, an example of like where you see AI kind of heading in education and supporting it with an example that you've seen.
Yeah, I see. I think a lot of schools are still very early
Sure.
days. So I, it's very difficult to go, right, there's a school over here who are kind of like 10 years in the future. I
Mm,
just don't think we're going to get that at the moment. Although we do see some experimental schools. So, for
mm,
example, there's a school in the United States called Alpha Schools, and I think there's three or four of them, and they are using artificial intelligence, a platform, an AI platform to for students to learn kind of the core content.
mm,
And they are claiming, and I haven't seen the research behind it, but the headlines of their website claim that students learn just as much in 2 hours as they would in a full day of regular school. So
right.
it's interesting to see there are some kind of
Mm,
schools kind of going out and really pushing themselves. They
yeah.
tend to be kind of they're not state schools. They're not within
Right.
the system. They tend to be independent schools because
They're always kind of pushing the limits. Yeah.
yeah, and they've got that freedom.
Right.
They've probably got a bit of money as well from investment and so on.
Right.
Uh, some online schools are starting to do some really interesting things around creating AI tutors again to teach core
Mm,
content and material. Um, so I think that's probably kind of the radical end of this.
right. Right.
But I think probably on the ground within kind of your regular school, uh, I I think it comes down again, going back to what we were saying about leadership and integration. I think it comes down to where I see it happening really well is a, a head teacher or a principal who is passionate about giving their teachers the best tools possible.
Right.
And so
Mm,
they get someone like me or yourself or somebody into their school and go, right, can we work with you? Can you show us how to use these
mm,
tools? Can we
yeah.
work on a strategy, a plan? And slowly over a period of a year,
Right.
let's upskill our teachers, upskill our
Mm,
students. Let's let's create our policy so everyone knows where we are. There's confidence
mm,
in what in kind of what's expected, and just kind of building those skills level layer by layer. Really, it's not.
yeah.
I suppose it's not rocket science. It's just good old. How do we integrate something, whether that be a
Sure.
new teaching
Sure.
and learning
Like
strategy,
an
whether it
AI
be
competency almost, or
yeah,
where you're developing skills and how do I prompt properly? How do I, get it to go a bit further? Like there's tons of skills involved. I feel anyway.
yeah,
One,
no, I 100% agree with you, and I think probably the major hurdle is that I think in a lot of schools, and this is just from my experience, and I talk about, and I'm mainly my own experience of schools,
Mhm.
is that ed tech has always kind of been treated as an additional extra.
Yeah,
So it's
exactly.
like if you find value in it, use it.
Right.
But we're not going to push it on everyone because we've got a
Right.
teacher here who's been teaching for 50 years, still gets good grades and uses a chalkboard. So we're not going to disrupt them. So it's
Right.
kind of like, yeah, if you want to use it, use it. We might get a
Yeah.
tech coach in to show you, but you don't. It's not. You don't have to use it. And I
Right.
think that's where
Right.
something like this starts to become unstuck because then you bring AI on top of that, and then the mindset of most people in the school is, oh well, it's just a tech thing. It's for those techie teachers. It's
Yeah.
and
Totally.
then I suppose the the gap becomes even wider in what what teachers are able to do and what students are able to do between those who are using the tech, are comfortable with tech, and those who aren't. So I feel like some
Yeah.
schools have almost got to reverse back
Mm,
10 years and go, right, let's tackle just using a device in a class first. Let's tackle
right.
those, get the foundation in place before we start to put AI on top of it.
Totally, totally. I've been experiencing small wins. I've kind of had that was my mindset. Like, let's just show them little things because most of the time it's kind of seen as like kids are going to cheat using it, right? It's going to make their lives easier. They're not going to critically think anymore. It's like, but one win that that I had success with is just differentiation, because it's a really tough thing for teachers, mainly in classrooms where you have such a variety of students in front of you, and just showing them how they could adapt reading levels was kind of like, so I find like if I can show one thing that they might be like, oh wow, that was fast and good,
Yeah.
and I can help now Jimmy who can't read what I have in class,
Yeah.
like those little wins I find that slowly start to, but as in everything, it's like one teacher educator at a time, right? It's system change in education is it's hard. um,
Yeah,
to
yeah, it
push.
is, yeah, and I think you're right. I think it's like I don't know about yourself, but when I do workshops, I sometimes get a lot of people, a lot of teachers into those workshops because their head teacher has kind of said, right, this is your slot. You're going to go along to this workshop. And then, I hear comments a lot of the time like, oh, I've heard people talking about it. But
Mm,
until you actually sit that teacher down in front of a computer and you show them like literally you just have to type this in and this is the type of response you
right.
start to get,
Yeah.
then they just can't conceptualize it. And I suppose I suppose if people are talking about this AI thing, what's AI?
Right. What's this new thing all the time? All these
Yeah,
new things, a new flavor of the month. Um,
yeah. And if workloads are crazy like they are for most teachers, then
yeah.
who's got time to start exploring something that could disrupt and put
Right.
more time
Yeah.
on your plate?
I'm gonna have to change everything and like
Yeah,
adapt it all again. And yeah. Well, it's an interesting it's an interesting life and world that we're in education anyway. It seems to be evolving and evolving slowly, but I mean the stuff's there and it's at our fingertips now. It's just kind of figuring out how can we leverage that technology in an effective manner to help our kids. I mean, because these kids are going to grow up with this, like you said, everywhere. AI is not going anywhere. Like the internet didn't go anywhere. Like TVs, radios, telephones, like these things exist still today. But at the moment, they, when they came in, it's like tipping points. It's like, whoa. So I feel
yeah,
AI is doing that.
yeah, and I think it will get to the point. I mean, eventually that teacher who was teaching at that school for 30 years and didn't like tech eventually had to sit down and because the register now was on the computer and that's how
Right.
they had to access it. So they had no choice. I think it will get to the point where kind of you're not going to have any choice but to get to grips with some of this technology and that's whether that's painful or not is going to come down to good leadership, I think. And I think it's a patchwork out there at the moment in terms of good
Yep.
leadership around this. But again, I don't blame them because there's so much vying for their attention.
Sure. Absolutely. Totally. Well, Dan, this has been a super pleasure. Like, this is so fun. I would love to have you back on because there's so much more we can talk
Yeah, I feel
about.
like we've
This is
scratched
just
the
like a
surface of
part one almost.
a lot of things. Yeah, but yeah, I'd love to come back on. Thanks, Chris.
Amazing. Well, take care of yourself and thanks for sharing. I will link your site and your books on the post and people check it out. The AI Educator. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Chris.